Sometimes the most broken souls find each other in the darkest moments. When the world turns its back, a stranger, his kindness can change everything. The dusty stagecoach rolled into Red Rock under the scorching July sun of 1882, carrying Elizabeth Collins toward what she believed would be her new life. Her damaged right arm, wrapped carefully in a faded blue shawl, bore the permanent reminder of that terrible Apache raid 3 months ago. The attack had claimed her parents and left her with limited use of her dominant hand, but her spirit remained unbroken. William Preston waited at the Methodist chapel, his polished boots gleaming against the wooden steps. The correspondence marriage had been arranged through letters, and Elizabeth had been honest about her condition. Or so she thought. As she stepped down from the coach, Preston, his face twisted with disgust. "You are the Collins woman?" he asked coldly, his eyes fixed on her concealed arm. "Yes, Mr. Preston. I am Elizabeth. Show me your hand." With trembling fingers, she unwrapped the shawl, revealing the scarred, partially paralyzed limb. Preston recoiled visibly. "You are a damaged woman," he declared loudly, ensuring the gathering townspeople could hear every word. "I will not bind myself to spoiled goods. This arrangement is finished." He turned and strode away, leaving Elizabeth standing alone before the chapel, her belongings scattered at her feet, the whispers of the crowd cutting deeper than any physical wound ever could. Elizabeth sat alone in the empty chapel, her heart heavy with shame and uncertainty. The wooden pews around her seemed to echo with the cruel laughter that had followed Preston's rejection. She clutched her damaged arm closer to her chest, wondering how she would survive in this hostile town with nowhere to go and barely enough money for a return ticket east. The chapel door creaked open, and heavy boots echoed against the wooden floor. A tall figure emerged from the shadows, his face bearing terrible scars that spoke of violence and survival. Jacob Stone had been watching the entire humiliating scene from across the street, and something deep within him had stirred with righteous anger. "Ma'am," he said quietly, removing his worn leather hat to reveal dark hair streaked with premature gray. "No decent woman deserves such treatment, especially not in the Lord's house." Elizabeth looked up, startled by his scarred but kind eyes. "I thank you for your words, sir, but I fear there is little anyone can do now." "There is always something that can be done," Jacob replied, extending his hand. "My name is Jacob Stone, and I would be honored to help you leave this place with your dignity intact." Outside, Preston appeared with several townspeople, his face red with indignation. "Stone, you have no business here. That woman is not your concern." Jacob's voice remained steady but carried an unmistakable edge of authority. "Every person wronged in the sight of God becomes my concern, Preston." Marshal Hawkins stepped forward from the growing crowd, his weathered face grave with concern. The silver star on his vest caught the afternoon sunlight as he approached Elizabeth and Jacob with measured steps. His hand rested casually on his gun belt, though he made no threatening gesture. "Miss Collins, I feel obliged to warn you about the man offering his assistance," Hawkins said, his voice carrying the weight of years spent keeping peace in frontier towns. "Jacob Stone here has a bloody past that folks in these parts have not forgotten easily." Jacob's jaw tightened, but he remained silent as the marshal continued. "There was a fire at the McClintock Ranch 2 years back. Good people died in that blaze, and some say Stone was involved in starting it. The family burned alive in their own home while this man walked away without a scratch." Elizabeth felt her heart racing, but something in Jacob's eyes told her there was more to this story than the marshal was revealing. The scars on his face suggested he had not escaped any fire unharmed. "I appreciate your warning, Marshal," Elizabeth replied carefully. "But Mr. Preston has made it clear that I am not welcome in Red Rock. I must make my own choices about who to trust." Preston pushed through the crowd, his face twisted with anger and something else, perhaps fear. "Stone, you will not take that woman anywhere. She belongs here until proper arrangements can be made." Jacob's voice was quiet but firm. "She belongs to no one, Preston, and proper arrangements were already broken by your cruelty in the house of worship." The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife as townspeople whispered among themselves, some nodding in agreement with Preston, others looking uncomfortable with the entire situation. Despite the marshal's warnings and Preston's protests, Elizabeth made her decision. She gathered her few belongings from the saloon where she had planned to stay before the wedding and climbed onto Jacob's horse behind him. The townspeople watched with mixed expressions of curiosity and disapproval as they rode out of Red Rock, heading toward the distant mountains that rose like ancient guardians against the azure sky. The journey took them through winding trails carved by decades of miners and trappers. Jacob, his horse, a sturdy chestnut mare named Belle, navigated the rocky paths with sure-footed confidence. As they climbed higher, the air grew cooler and the scent of pine trees replaced the dust and heat of the desert below. "Where are we going, Mr. Stone?" Elizabeth asked, her voice barely audible over the wind. "Somewhere safe," he replied simply. "Somewhere Preston and his kind cannot reach you." After 2 hours of steady climbing, they emerged into a beautiful mountain clearing where a well-maintained log cabin sat nestled among towering pines. Smoke rose lazily from the stone chimney, and Elizabeth could see that someone had been caring for this place with great attention to detail. Jacob helped her down from the horse, his touch gentle despite his calloused hands. "This has been my home for the past year," he said, leading her toward the cabin. "It is not much, but it is honest shelter." Inside, Elizabeth was surprised by the cabin, its warmth and organization. Books filled handmade shelves along one wall, while hunting supplies and preserved foods were neatly arranged on others. A comfortable chair sat near the fireplace, and clean blankets were folded on a simple but sturdy bed. "You read?" she asked, noticing the impressive collection of literature. Jacob nodded, though his expression grew somewhat embarrassed. "I try to improve myself when time allows. Education was something my family valued before." He trailed off, leaving the sentence unfinished. Elizabeth understood the weight of unspoken tragedy in his voice. She had learned to recognize that particular pain in others since losing her own parents. That evening, as they sat by the crackling fireplace sharing a simple meal of beans and cornbread, Elizabeth noticed Jacob studying her face intently. The flickering flames cast dancing shadows across his scarred features, making him appear both mysterious and oddly familiar. "Miss Collins," he began hesitantly, "might I ask about your family name? You mentioned your parents were killed in the Apache raid, but was your father perhaps a doctor?" Elizabeth looked up sharply, surprised by the question. "Yes, he was, Dr. Thomas Collins. He practiced medicine in several frontier towns before we settled near Silver Creek." "How could you possibly know that?" Jacob set down his coffee cup with trembling hands. "Your father saved my life 3 years ago. I was brought to him after a terrible fire, burned so badly that most doctors would have given up on me entirely. But Dr. Collins worked day and night to heal my wounds." The revelation hit Elizabeth like a physical blow. She stared at Jacob, his scars with new understanding, seeing them now as evidence of survival rather than marks of violence. "The fire? Was it the McClintock Ranch?" Jacob nodded slowly, his eyes filled with pain that went far deeper than physical scars. "What Marshall Hawkins told you today was only part of the truth. Yes, I was there when the McClintock family died, but I was not the one who started that fire." He stood and walked to the window, gazing out at the star-filled mountain sky. William Preston had been trying to force the McClintocks off their land for months. He knew there were valuable gold deposits beneath their property, and he was determined to claim them by any means necessary. Elizabeth felt her blood run cold. "Are you suggesting that Preston was responsible for the fire?" "I am not suggesting it, Miss Collins. I am stating it as fact." Jacob turned back to face her, his expression grave. "Just as I am stating that your parents' accident was no accident at all. Preston discovered that your father had treated me after the fire, and he feared what Dr. Collins might have learned about his activities. The attack on your family's wagon was arranged by Preston's men, disguised to look like Apache raiders. The following morning brought an unexpected visitor to the mountain cabin." Elizabeth woke to the sound of approaching hoofbeats and Jacob's tense voice outside. Through the window, she could see a young man in a deputy's uniform dismounting from his horse, his badge glinting in the early sunlight. "Jacob Stone," the deputy called out, his voice carrying both authority and something that sounded almost like regret. "I need to speak with you." Jacob emerged from the cabin, his hands visible and empty, showing he meant no trouble. "Deputy McClintock, I wondered when you might come calling." Elizabeth gasped softly as she realized the significance of the name. This was David McClintock, the sole surviving son of the family that had perished in the fire Jacob had described. She watched from the window as the two men faced each other in the morning light. "Preston has put a bounty on your head, Stone," Deputy McClintock said, his young face lined with weariness beyond his years. $500 for bringing you back to Red Rock, dead or alive. He claims you kidnapped the Collins woman." Jacob's expression remained calm, but Elizabeth could see the tension in his shoulders. "And what do you believe, David?" The deputy was quiet for a long moment, studying Jacob's scarred face. "I believe there are too many unanswered questions about what happened to my family. I believe Preston has been spreading lies for too long. And I believe justice has a way of finding the truth, even when good men try to hide it." Elizabeth stepped outside, her heart pounding but her resolve firm. "Deputy McClintock, I am Elizabeth Collins, and I want you to know that Mr. Stone did not kidnap me. He offered me assistance when I was abandoned and humiliated by William Preston." David McClintock touched his hat respectfully. "Miss Collins, I am glad to see you are safe. But you should know that Preston is claiming you are not of sound mind to make your own decisions due to your recent trauma." "That is absurd," Elizabeth replied with fire in her voice. "My mind is perfectly clear, and I have chosen to trust Mr. Stone because he has shown me more kindness than anyone in Red Rock." The deputy nodded slowly. "I believe you, but Preston has influence in these parts, and he will not give up easily. You both need to be very careful." That night, Elizabeth was awakened by desperate cries coming from across the cabin. Jacob was thrashing in his sleep, his face twisted in anguish as he fought against invisible demons. She could hear him calling out names: Sarah, little Tom, Mary, and realized these must be the McClintock family members who had perished in the fire. "No, I cannot reach them," he shouted, his voice breaking with desperation. "The flames are too high. Sarah, take the children and run." Elizabeth approached carefully, her heart aching for his obvious torment. She gently placed her good hand on his shoulder. "Jacob, wake up. You are safe. The fire is in the past." His eyes snapped open, wild with terror before focusing on her face. Sweat covered his scarred features, and his breathing came in ragged gasps. "Elizabeth, forgive me for waking you." "There is nothing to forgive," she said softly, sitting on the edge of his cot. "Do you want to tell me what really happened that night?" Jacob sat up slowly, running his hands through his hair. "I worked for the McClintocks, helping with their cattle and horses. Good people, all of them. Sarah McClintock was pregnant with their fourth child when Preston started making his threats." He paused, his voice becoming barely a whisper. "I overheard Preston talking to his men about burning them out. I tried to warn the family, but they refused to believe that anyone could be so evil. They had faith that decent people would prevail." Elizabeth remained silent, sensing he needed to continue. "When I saw the flames that night, I rode as hard as I could to reach their house. But Preston's men had blocked the roads and cut the water line to their well. I managed to get inside the burning house, but the smoke was too thick, the flames too intense. I could hear them calling for help, but I could not reach them in time." His voice broke completely. "I tried, Elizabeth. God knows I tried to save them, but I failed. And now David McClintock will spend his life believing I was responsible for his family, his death." Elizabeth took his scarred hand in her good one. "The scars on your face tell me you did not run from that fire. You went into it, knowing you might die trying to save them." 3 days after Deputy McClintock's visit, dark clouds began gathering over the mountains with ominous intensity. By evening, snow was falling in thick, heavy flakes that promised to trap them in the cabin for several days. Jacob busied himself securing the shutters and bringing in extra firewood, while Elizabeth prepared additional food supplies and checked their water reserves. "We may be here together for quite some time," Jacob said, stacking logs near the fireplace. "Mountain storms can last 4 or 5 days when they settle in like this." Elizabeth nodded, surprised to find that the prospect did not frighten her as it might have a week ago. "I confess that I feel safer here with you than I would anywhere else right now." As the storm intensified outside, they found themselves drawn into deeper conversations than either had experienced in years. Jacob spoke of his childhood in East Texas, where his father had been a teacher and his mother a seamstress. Elizabeth shared memories of traveling with her doctor father, learning basic medical skills as they moved from town to town helping frontier families. "Your knowledge of medicine could be valuable out here," Jacob observed, watching her examine his old burn scars with professional interest. "These wounds never healed properly because I did not have proper care after your father treated the worst of them." Elizabeth gently traced the damaged skin along his jaw. "Father always said that healing required both medical skill and human compassion. The scars may remain, but they tell the story of your survival and courage." Jacob caught her hand in his, their eyes meeting across the small space between them. "You have shown me more kindness in these few days than I have known in 2 years of isolation." During the long evenings, Elizabeth helped Jacob improve his reading skills while he taught her practical mountain survival techniques. She learned to properly tend the fire, prepare jerked meat, and identify edible plants. He discovered the joy of reading poetry aloud, his deep voice bringing new life to words he had only whispered to himself before. By the fourth day of the storm, they moved around each other with the comfortable familiarity of longtime companions, their initial awkwardness replaced by genuine affection and mutual respect. The morning after the storm cleared, Elizabeth was tending to their breakfast when Jacob suddenly grabbed her arm and pulled her away from the window. "Get down," he whispered urgently. "We have company, and they did not come here for friendly conversation." Through a crack in the shutters, she could see three rough-looking men positioned around the cabin, its perimeter. Their faces were hard and weathered, the kind of men who sold their guns to the highest bidder without asking questions about right or wrong. "Preston has hired guns," Jacob muttered, reaching for his rifle. "They must have tracked us during the storm." The leader of the group, a tall man with a black beard, called out from behind a large pine tree. "Stone, we know you are in there with the woman. Send her out, and we might let you live long enough to stand trial." Jacob positioned himself near the front window, his rifle ready but not yet aimed. "Elizabeth Collins is here of her own free will," he shouted back. "She is under my protection, and I will not allow anyone to harm her." "Preston wants her back in Red Rock," the gunman replied. "He says she is not right in the head and needs proper care. You have no legal right to keep her." Elizabeth felt anger rising in her chest. "I am perfectly capable of speaking for myself," she called out, moving closer to the window despite Jacob's attempt to keep her back. "William Preston has no authority over me, and I choose to remain here." A shot rang out, splintering the wood near the window frame. Jacob immediately returned fire, though he aimed high, sending a warning shot over the attackers' heads. "The next one will not miss," he warned. "Jacob," Elizabeth whispered, her medical training taking over despite her fear. "There is something you should know about this cabin. When I was examining the back room yesterday, I found what appears to be an old mining tunnel entrance behind that loose board." Jacob's eyes widened with understanding. The previous owner must have been a prospector. That tunnel might lead down the mountain. Another shot shattered a window pane, and Jacob felt a sharp pain as a wood splinter cut across his shoulder. Elizabeth immediately moved to examine the wound, her hands steady despite the danger surrounding them. Using Elizabeth's knowledge of the hidden tunnel, they managed to escape through the old mining shaft, emerging a quarter-mile down the mountainside under cover of thick smoke Jacob created by dampening the cabin's fire with wet pine needles. However, their freedom was short-lived. Preston had anticipated their possible escape routes and positioned additional men throughout the mountain passes. By evening, they found themselves captured and brought to another remote cabin, where William Preston waited with a satisfied smile. Deputy McClintock stood beside him, though his expression seemed troubled and uncertain. "Miss Collins," Preston said in a mockingly gentle voice, "you have caused considerable worry among the good people of Red Rock. We've come to bring you back where you belong." Elizabeth lifted her chin defiantly despite her exhaustion. "I belong nowhere that you have any say in the matter, Mr. Preston." Preston, his facade of kindness dropped instantly. "You will sign over the mineral rights to your family, this land, just as we originally agreed in our correspondence. Your parents' debts must be settled, and I am prepared to be generous in my offer." "What debts?" Elizabeth demanded. "My father was an honest man who paid his obligations." Jacob, his hands bound behind his back, struggled against his restraints. "Tell her the truth, Preston. Tell her about the gold deposits you discovered beneath her family's property. Tell her why you really wanted her parents dead." Preston struck Jacob across the face, leaving a fresh mark on his already scarred cheek. "You will keep your lies to yourself, Stone." Deputy McClintock stepped forward, his hand moving unconsciously toward his weapon. "Preston, there was no mention of any debts in the legal documents you showed me. And striking a bound prisoner is not lawful behavior. Stay out of matters that do not concern you, boy," Preston snapped. "Your job is to bring in criminals, not question your betters." Elizabeth watched this exchange with growing understanding. She slowly reached into her coat pocket, where she had hidden her father's small derringer, a weapon he had given her for protection but which she had never expected to use. "Gentlemen," she said quietly, drawing the tiny pistol with her good hand, "I believe this conversation has gone on long enough. Deputy McClintock, I would appreciate it if you would untie Mr. Stone immediately. Preston, his eyes widened in shock. You would not dare use that weapon, woman. Perhaps not, Elizabeth replied steadily, but I am certainly prepared to find out if you are willing to test that assumption. As the tense standoff continued in the remote cabin, the sound of approaching horses broke the silence. Preston, his confidence wavered as he realized these were not his men returning. Through the window, they could see two Mexican riders dismounting with deliberate care, their hands visible and non-threatening, but their bearing suggesting they were not men to be underestimated. Senor Preston, called the older of the two brothers as they approached the cabin door. We have been looking for you for a very long time. Jacob recognized them immediately. Miguel and Carlos Sanchez. I wondered if you were still alive. Very much alive, amigo, Miguel replied, stepping into the cabin with his brother behind him. And we have been collecting evidence against this man for 2 years, waiting for the right moment to present it to proper authorities. Preston, his face had gone pale. I do not know what these men are talking about. They are probably criminals themselves, looking to cause trouble. Carlos Sanchez produced a worn leather journal from his coat, holding it up for everyone to see. This belonged to you, Senor Preston. You dropped it near the McClintock Ranch the night of the fire. We found it the next morning while searching for survivors. Deputy McClintock stepped forward, his interest clearly aroused. What does it contain? Details of every crime this man has committed in the past 3 years, Miguel answered. The McClintock fire, the arranged attack on the Collins family, the threats against other property owners, and the names of every man he hired to do his dirty work. Elizabeth kept her derringer steady while listening to this revelation. How did you come to possess this evidence? We worked for the McClintocks before they died, Carlos explained. Good people who treated us with respect and paid fair wages. When they were murdered, we swore an oath to see justice done, but we knew Preston had too much influence in Red Rock for local law to handle properly. Preston was visibly sweating now. That journal could have been written by anyone. You have no proof I was involved in anything. Miguel opened the journal and began reading in Preston, his own handwriting. August 15th, 1880. Met with Johnson and Creek about the Collins problem. Arranged for Apache disguises and attack on Silver Creek Road. Must make it look like random raid. Deputy McClintock. His hand moved to his weapon as the full scope of Preston's crimes became clear. Mr. Preston, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder. 3 weeks later, the courthouse in Fort Worth was packed with spectators from across the territory. Word had spread quickly about the shocking revelations surrounding William Preston and his criminal activities. Elizabeth sat in the witness chair, her voice clear and steady as she testified about her family, this murder, and Preston, this attempted land grab. The defendant arranged for my parents to be killed so that he could claim mineral rights to our property, she stated, holding Preston's journal open to the incriminating page. This evidence, written in his own hand, describes exactly how the attack was planned and executed. Judge Harrison examined the journal carefully, his weathered face grave as he read Preston's detailed confessions. This document appears to be genuine, written in the defendant's own handwriting. Mr. Preston, do you have any explanation for these entries? Preston, flanked by his expensive lawyers, maintained his innocence despite the overwhelming evidence. Your Honor, that journal could have been forged by anyone seeking to discredit me. I am a respected businessman who has contributed greatly to the development of this region. Deputy McClintock took the stand next, his testimony finally revealing the truth about his family, his death. I have spent 2 years believing that Jacob Stone was responsible for the fire that killed my parents and siblings. The evidence presented here proves that I was wrong, and that Mr. Preston orchestrated their murders for financial gain. The Sanchez brothers provided additional testimony about Preston, his other victims, including several small ranchers who had been forced off their land through intimidation and violence. Their collected evidence painted a picture of systematic criminal behavior spanning several years. Jacob Stone, his name finally cleared of all charges, testified about Preston, his threats, and the night of the McClintock fire. I tried to save that family, Your Honor. The scars on my face are proof that I went into that burning house to rescue them, not to harm them. After 3 days of testimony, the jury deliberated for less than 2 hours before returning with their verdict. Preston was found guilty on all charges and sentenced to hang for his crimes. Justice had finally been served for the McClintock family, the Collins family, and all of Preston's other victims. With Preston's conviction, Elizabeth regained full legal control of her family, its property, and the valuable gold deposits beneath it. However, she had no desire to become a mining baroness. Instead, she sold a portion of her mineral rights to a reputable mining company from Denver, keeping enough to ensure financial security for herself and Jacob. The money from the sale allowed her to purchase medical supplies and establish a proper clinic. She had decided to honor her father's memory by continuing his work of bringing healing to frontier communities that desperately needed medical care. Deputy McClintock visited them at the mountain cabin one crisp autumn morning, carrying a small leather pouch that clinked softly with each step of his horse. "Miss Collins, Mr. Stone," he said, dismounting with a respectful nod. "I wanted to return something that rightfully belongs to your family." He opened the pouch to reveal a collection of gold nuggets and a beautifully crafted silver locket. "These were found in the ruins of our family home after the fire. My mother always said they belonged to the doctor who saved my little sister from pneumonia years ago." "I believe that was your father, Miss Collins." Elizabeth accepted the locket with tears in her eyes. Inside was a photograph of her parents on their wedding day, somehow preserved despite everything that had happened. "Thank you, David. This means more to me than all the gold in those mountains." Jacob had been working to rebuild the cabin, expanding it to accommodate Elizabeth's medical practice. The Sanchez brothers had agreed to help with the construction, and together they created a comfortable home that could also serve the medical needs of the scattered mountain communities. "Dr. Collins," Jacob said one evening as they watched the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and crimson, "I never imagined that helping a desperate woman in a chapel would lead to finding such purpose in my life." Elizabeth smiled, her damaged hand resting comfortably in his strong, scarred one. "Perhaps we were both meant to find healing together, Jacob. Sometimes the most beautiful things grow from the most difficult circumstances." Their new life was beginning to take shape, built on foundations of truth, justice, and genuine love that had emerged from shared suffering and mutual respect. Spring arrived in the mountains with a burst of wildflowers and the sweet sound of running streams fed by melting snow. Elizabeth had successfully delivered 3 babies and treated dozens of patients in her mountain clinic, earning the respect and gratitude of families throughout the region. Jacob had proven invaluable as her assistant, his gentle manner and strong hands perfect for helping with difficult cases. One evening, as they sat on their newly built porch watching the stars emerge over the peaceful valley, Jacob took Elizabeth's hand in both of his. "Elizabeth, these past months with you have shown me what true happiness means. I know I am a scarred man with a difficult past, but I love you with all my heart." He knelt beside her chair, pulling a simple gold ring from his pocket. "This belonged to my grandmother. The only thing I saved from my family was home before I came west. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Elizabeth's eyes filled with tears of joy as she looked at the man who had rescued her from shame and helped her find her true calling. "Jacob Stone, you are the finest man I have ever known. Yes, I will marry you gladly." 2 months later, they stood together in the same Methodist chapel where they had first met under such painful circumstances. The building was filled with friends and patients whose lives Elizabeth had touched, including the Sanchez brothers, Deputy McClintock, and dozens of grateful families from the surrounding mountains. Reverend Matthews, who had witnessed Preston's cruel rejection of Elizabeth, now smiled broadly as he performed the ceremony. "Jacob Stone, do you take Elizabeth Collins to be your lawfully wedded wife, to love and honor her in sickness and in health, for better or worse, until death do you part?" "I do," Jacob replied, his voice strong and clear. "Elizabeth Collins, do you take Jacob Stone to be your lawfully wedded husband, to love and honor him in sickness and in health, for better or worse, until death do you part?" "I do," Elizabeth answered, her heart full of love and hope for their future together. As they exchanged rings and sealed their vows with a kiss, the congregation erupted in joyful celebration for 2 people who had found love and redemption in each other. 1 year after their wedding, Elizabeth and Jacob had built a life that neither had dared to imagine during those dark days in Red Rock. Their mountain home had become a beacon of hope for the scattered communities throughout the region, with Elizabeth's medical practice saving countless lives and Jacob's quiet strength providing comfort to families in their most difficult moments. Elizabeth had regained much of the use in her damaged arm through careful exercises and Jacob's patient massage treatments. While she would never have full mobility, she had learned to adapt her medical techniques and could perform most procedures with remarkable skill. Her patients never saw her injury as a limitation, only as proof that healing was possible even after the most devastating trauma. Jacob had enrolled in a correspondence course to improve his education, with Elizabeth as his devoted tutor. His reading skills had advanced remarkably, and he had begun keeping detailed records of their patients and medical supplies. The nightmares about the McClintock fire had gradually faded, replaced by dreams of the future he was building with his beloved wife. Deputy McClintock had become a regular visitor, often bringing his own family to Elizabeth for medical care. The friendship between the three of them had grown strong, built on mutual respect and their shared understanding of loss and redemption. David had named his newborn son Jacob, in honor of the man he had once wrongly suspected. The Sanchez brothers had established a successful freight business, transporting medical supplies to Elizabeth's clinic and helping other mountain families with their needs. Their loyalty and friendship had proven invaluable in building trust within the community. On quiet evenings, Elizabeth and Jacob would sit together on their porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains in brilliant colors while planning for the future. They spoke of expanding the clinic, perhaps training other medical assistants to serve remote areas, and of the children they hoped to have together. Jacob, Elizabeth said one evening, her hand resting on her growing belly, I believe our first child will arrive just as winter gives way to spring. Jacob, his scarred face lit up with pure joy as he placed his hand over hers. A perfect time for new beginnings, he whispered, kissing her gently. Together, they had proven that physical scars and emotional wounds need not define a person's worth or limit their capacity for love, healing, and happiness.